Stood wide Lego monorail. Built lots of little vehicles to test on it. So all we have to do is to find a switch to plug the vehicle in. What I have done, maybe a mistake, I used 0.1 spacers with a space in between for my power, and then my motor just has 2 spaces so that when I've built something I can't get it the wrong way round. Right, here's a little vehicle trogging along the 2 stud wide track. Seems to go quite well. Put it the other way around, bring it back again, here we come. Comes along, seems to troggle along quite nicely. What I do is to use these lithium cells. Need to be careful when charging. This one I've measured at 308 milliamp hours, so seems quite a good size. These little door lock motors with a pinion on the bottom driving this angle gear here, which in turn drives a 16-pin Lego gear, which is mounted on the same shaft as 2 pulleys with tyres on. To keep it on the track then, just use these with pins in the end. The pins then are short pins. Could use 2 of them and long pins, but then I get into problems with spacing. And they seem to work alright, so they just plugs onto there, and that then builds the little buggy. On the front here I've just put a roller so that the wheels, it rests on that at the front and the wheels at the back. When we look at these motors, they're quite fantastic, because if I put my meter in there, and then I've just got a little, I've got a switch on that, so this then, you don't need this connector now. Put a switch on here, so this is a simple reversing switch that'll just change the direction of the motor. And then I need to plug it into this end. Not really bothered about polarity. Plug it in there, put this on to milliamps. There seems to be using about just under 12 milliamps. And if I slow it down, put a, gone quite high there. Put a bit of load on it, it's gone up as high as 30, 40 milliamps under load. I wouldn't expect it to be that amount of load. If I change the direction, it shouldn't make much difference. Not much difference there, under load again. Almost 40 milliamps. So, very good motors all in all. So disconnect that then. The motor, the battery is supposed to be rated at 380 milliamp hours, so even at 30 milliamps should last for something like 10 hours, should that battery. More than enough for what I want it to do. I built quite a lot of different ones of these. Here's one, once again with the motor just glue gunned onto the bricks. Once again pulley wheels, 16 gear in the middle, and this tooth at the end. But this has the motor the other way around, and I've just put a single wheel on the front to get it to operate. Here's one that didn't work. I thought I could get away with just putting a motor up here without a gearbox, provided it could come down onto this worm at the bottom, but it can't because the tyres on the pulleys catch on the worm, so that ain't gonna work. Another idea was sort of to use studless ones. There's a chassis for a studless one, but couldn't really see where to go from there, what I could fasten onto it. I did manage to build one. Just uses a friction motor, then the motor just pushes down onto the tyre. So that just pushes down onto the tyre, turns the tyre round, and it has a couple of tyres at the other end to drive it along. That's studless and seems to work quite well, but the motor's fastened on with paper clips. Another one here that is a similar idea. It uses studded Lego, and the motor is once again a friction pushed on by a paper clip. This one is actually uses a Lego motor. The unfortunate thing is I think the motor's broken. They're very old motors, and if I try and get it to work, the motor seems to go in spurts. It doesn't seem to go constantly. Might be the band that I'm driving it with that's tightening up and slackening, but the motor does sound funny when it's operating. Pity that, because that was quite a nice design, just using the pulley on the motor down to a pulley between the two wheels. Seems to work, but not as well as I'd like. Another one here, this idea of having a vertical motor, once again glue gunned in with a bevel gear down at the bottom onto a bevel gear, just as a single tyre on the bottom, but uses two rollers either side so it doesn't topple off. Another one here then, this was a work in progress, but I think I've given up with it. Just use a small non-Lego worm gear onto a worm in the middle, and that might well work. But I've drilled a hole through the Lego brick for the shaft for the worm to go onto. I'd have to do the same at the other side and then put a pulley or something onto this with a band from a motor. Here's one I've built which is non-Lego sides. I've used the Lego gears so it's easier to see the pinion on the motor, the bevel gear at the back, and then the pulley wheels with the rubber tyres on. This is an example of an overcharged battery. It's supposed to be 350 milliamp hours. I think I charged it probably at a massive amount, and so it's blown up. Still seems to work. I know a lot of people wouldn't like it, but it seems to work for me. Another one here, based on the idea of the motor being vertical with a pulley on the bottom, and then that crosses over to get onto the wheels at the bottom. Just glued a support in at the front. Seems to work alright. Built a little remote for it, for that one to work. And finally, a big one here, which uses a worm gear, has 4 wheels, and the motor once again glued on the back with a shaft just put onto it so that it can turn the worm gear. The track itself then, if we look at the track, very clever. The straight track isn't difficult, you just put tiles on top of straight bricks. But the other track where it bends, and I was quite surprised at this, because when I looked at the track, it's supposed to be based on a 0.2, I thought it was, gap. But if I put this into here, if I can get it in, there, I've got a 90 gap on that one, a 118 gap on that one, and some of them 115. They're a 160 gap between the Lego bricks. So I'm sure I must be straining, I don't think that is 2.9. I'm sure I must be straining the Lego bricks to get the 1.4 gap on them. But what I have managed to do is to reduce the width down then, so I can get a super curvature on the end, so it'll actually go on my bench, and the trucks will go around on it. To build this track, it works on a principle of sort of, lots of people have done this, but I had trouble understanding it. They start off with this tile and use a 2x4, so it's a 4x4, sorry, start off with a flat brick, a 2x2 flat brick, put a 1x2 on there, a 1x2 goes the other way, and then basically it has a tile on top, like so, and then the next unit uses another thin 4x2 on the 2x2 on the bottom, and then another 2x1, can't find one anywhere now, to go onto it there, and then this sort of goes on the back there, and then that's where we get the gap opening up, and that's what gives us our curvature and our big gap. Each of them is basically a unit to fill in the back so that it doesn't fall over. We put in a couple of singles, and don't know if a double would do there. People put singles in the back, maybe because when it opens up, maybe these push out and push into it, but it seems to work okay with the 2x1 instead of the 1x1s. And then this goes on the top. So what we have is fundamentally is a unit which has a 2x2, thin 2x2 on the bottom, a 2x1 and two 1x1s, and then that fits on the top like so, and that is sort of one unit. So it's only held together by this one brick sticking out at the end. So the next unit then as I see it is that, and that's another unit which then plugs into this unit here, and then it's just made up of all numbers of these units. So it's very good, very clever. Whoever designed it needs a lot of praise. Takes a lot of Lego bricks though. So what my son found out was that you can buy 16mm trunking. So I just bought a length of 16mm trunking, probably 2 meters long, and then put cuts in it and turned it round and glued it together, and that seems to work as an acceptable track. If I can find a buggy that'll work. This one should. Maybe not. Try this one again. Put a plug on it. Connect it together. And then that hopefully goes around this trunking, which replaces then, oops, don't crash into things, which then replaces the Lego and is a lot cheaper to build, although people may not be willing to use non-Lego, but I like it. I've enjoyed that project.